Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. It's been a minute since I've done a new episode, and I honestly couldn't think of a better guest to have back on than a good mentor, friend, just all the above. Jeff Lester. Jeff, welcome back to the show, man. How are you doing?
Hey, brother. As always, it's so good to be back with you. It has been a while. I'm grateful for the invite. I'm excited for what we get into today.
Yeah, me too. We had whenever we have conversations, it's great. It's like we're already about 25 minutes in. It feels like 5 minutes
Yeah.
just to the preamble of catching up, right? And I loved it because I was like, I didn't really have any sort of theme. And we had done, if anybody that's is aware, and if you're not aware, definitely look back. We did an 8-part series of podcasts. I would say kind of towards the back half of 2021 into 2022, and of course had sort of themes that just sort of trailed through, like your yoga training, the 8 limbs of yoga and such. And now here we are, themeless, and you were like excited about that as I was, as far as like, hey, what are we going to talk about? Well, let's just hit record and go from there. So I appreciate you being open to that as well.
I had a student, true story, just earlier this month. It's November. Good Lord, what a month.
Right.
Uh, in a yin yoga teacher training. So I'm leading the training, and one of the students says, I've listened to all your podcasts, and I thought, I've been on a few. And she told me she listened to the one with you and Matt, and to me, to so me and Matt, and I'm like, wow, I love that, because I don't think I showed it, or I don't think I promoted or shared it. And just random person in the UK has
Nice.
listened to all of them, and I was like, you've heard my voice more than anybody in here. Um, and at the same time, I was super grateful because that experience recording those was a lot of fun, and it has definitely spiraled into some of the courses and content that I created and the Hefe Living Collective as practices, because it's easy to talk about the philosophy, and what I'm super interested in more and more is closing the gap between the talking about a practice or technique, and then the embodying it and experiencing of it, letting each and every one of us have our experience with whatever the practice or tool is, so that we can get the goods, so to speak. So anyway, I just reminded me that we did that journey. I loved it. And then recently I've had a student come up to me and say that she had listened to all 8 episodes, which is, yeah, it was an odyssey. It was a proper odyssey.
It was, yeah, absolutely. And I love how it's like that was not the plan. It wasn't not the plan either, double negative. But moving in, we started a podcast, and it's just like, as we have this conversation of just kind of who you are and what your story is, there's like, essentially it felt like there was 8 limbs or 8 routes that we could have taken from that first podcast. I'm like, I invited you back very organically for a part 2. You came back for part 2, and then it felt like, as we were wrapping up part 2, I'm like, there's no way we're gonna wrap this all up. There's still quite a few, trails to go down here. And then by the time it was part 3, I think that's where we started going, some of these numbers that were showing up, the 8. And I'm like, well, let's go with like 8 podcasts, and infinity, the 8, 8 limbs of yoga. And then from there, we could really do these deep dives into different topics. And even the different topics, I think we sort of planned. I remember there was one of the mornings I was a guest on one of your yin yoga, and you were talking very much about like yin and yang and dualities and such. And we were both totally on the same page because we recorded a podcast pretty much right after that. And I'm like, well, what do you think of today? We'll talk about dualities. And you're like, I was thinking that too. And then, so it was just this really very like, or organic is a kind of this buzz term, but very much was that, and a journey and odyssey. I love that as well. And I
It
remember we ended
was.
on, yeah, the right around the first day of summer, or was right before that, and I ended up posting it on the first day of summer 2022, and that sort of just wrapped it all up. We went basically through the 4 seasons, if you will. It was like we started recording in fall and ended on the first day of summer. So just all that kind of stuff was super cool about that experience. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Very cool that somebody came to you and was listening to it as well, because I think it's a worthwhile listen, definitely.
I agree, and I'm excited. I hadn't thought about the seasons, and I'm excited to be. I'm going to share that again. Why not? Like,
Yeah,
it's a great piece of content.
it is.
Um,
Yeah,
Man, what a journey! And I wanted to know, like, a lot of our time together is what I'm sharing, and also I want to hear about you. And I'm just going to flip the script and ask you,
yeah,
like, how are these practices coming into your working with people in the way that you work with people, or does that play a role for you?
definitely. So I get, just to clarify, so the practices, like the things that we've been talking about, that
Oh
I've been
yeah.
talking about. Yeah, yeah, very much so.
Meditation, mindfulness.
Big time, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
um, it's been huge for me, Jeff, honestly. And like you mentioned, the Hefe Living Collective, which I've been, a part of. That was the other thing too. Just to kind of tie it back to the series. I remember going, hey, like I want to be able to continue this collaboration, and then the next logical step, you were very generous and provided me the opportunity to hop on board the Hefe Living Collective, which we'll get more into, I'm sure, in the conversation. So, and then that very much continued my journey, because on Hefe Living, there is, and see, you're flipping the script, but I'm wanting to give
Flipping
back
it
to
back.
you. It's like, but it has these wonderful courses and like weekly events and everything. And the courses that you have on there are amazing, as far as they have been able to continue on my journey, as far as the mindfulness, the meditation, the yoga, breath work. All three of those specifically, those are my big core, pillars of my everyday life. And I would say the biggest one for me, uh especially since I've been like a new business owner, like going into business for myself, has been the mindfulness part.
Mhm.
And that was like, before my previous job, it was very kind of conditioned, and spelt out for me a lot of ways. And I had these parameters, and I work very well with parameters. And I found how open the how just sort of blank the slate was for me to start a business. It was equal parts frustrating, intimidating, exciting, all those different terms, right? Uncomfortable and comfortable, and just wide open.
Mm.
And the mindfulness aspect was crucial for me, and it really did start for me getting into daily mindfulness practice, pretty much hand in hand with me starting my business. So, just the whole uh, aspect of being able to kind of slow things down, um, bring back my attention, like the whole idea of like meditation, that I look at it now as like not so much, being like, okay, I've got to empty my mind, right? It's like there's thoughts there, so you can acknowledge them, accept that, and then bring it back to whatever I'm focused on. Say if I'm just focused on like the sensation in my nose touching my top lip or something like that. And I kind of
Hmm.
take that same thought or structure of, what I do with meditation to my business, right? So if I'm in front of the computer and there's like, message going off my phone, blah, 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 all these distractions, I'm like, I will acknowledge, I accept that's happening. Instead of being like in my previous life, my previous career, I would be like, oh God, I got to do, being very reactionary. I can then bring my attention back to what I'm doing. So that
Mm.
really helped me um, understand what I have to do as a business owner, and how I can stay focused, has been the mindfulness part for sure. Not to mention the fact that I can then debrief or visualize. There's so many different things you can do with this, right? This concept, or this like practice of meditation. So just being able to like visualize how I want my day to start, which, so I always start with 20 minutes to an hour of meditation every day. And it's usually
Mm.
fairly free form, but there's definitely some visualization that comes into it as well. And then just the debriefing at the end of the day, of just like where normally I would kind of go to bed with like, oh man, I think I, handled that incorrectly, or, the coulda, shouldas. Those all just can kind of have their time to resurface, and have their moment to, I have what they have to say to me, and I can sort of put them to bed, as opposed to go to bed feeling that certain kind of way. It's easier just to sort of temper them and realize, okay, we lesson learned, I can move on from it. So that's a fairly lengthy and hopefully thoughtful, like somebody wants to answer.
Yeah.
But that's been the biggest one. Like, the stretching is great. That's a daily thing, but definitely the mindfulness. And I think just the fact that it started pretty much the same on the same, same time as my business has been crucial for me. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I feel like having a business, and I something we were talking about before we hit record is both of us are wearing the hat of a business owner, and that's its own part of the human experience, especially in this reality, that we're choosing to engage in the world in this way. And it's amazing to hear you putting the practices to use to um, be able to have that peace of mind by the time you wrap up a day is priceless. And especially for anybody who is investing their time and energy into creating positive change in the world, and really however that manifests through that individual. I totally have a prayer that those people that are really active in their dharma, in their work, in their purpose, to find that peace of mind, including myself, because it is, I mean, there's a lot of things vying for our attention. And like you said, the meditation practice, the understanding of where's my attention going, and it continues to reveal itself to me in many different ways where attention goes. And the more intimately I can be connected, and the more intimately we can be connected with where our attention goes, that's where our energy flows. And I know it's a saying and you've probably heard it, but it's the most priceless, valuable piece of information, piece of technology, because it's the precursor to all other technology. And by technology, I mean all of our programs, all of the ways that we manifest as human beings. Like, if you can get a handle on where the attention goes, then the rest becomes a delightful or chaotic or so, certainly interesting dance
Yeah.
of being yourself and myself. So it's like it's really special to hear that. And I tell you, for me too, it's so funny because in on the admin side, I definitely love the creative side, and one thing that I can appreciate as a creator is to have a project to put in that. Yes, it's so fascinating because it's like I could totally see myself wrangle with the resistance of a project, and it's like this energetic ah hitch in my body and mind. And then if I can put that, if I can just be with that for what it is, and take the most, it's fascinating. Take the most minimal effort, which is a massive endeavor in any way, to be able to put that, okay, resistance to the side and show up in service to just some structure, some getting organized in my process. And then it's fascinating how just a project goes like in a blossoming. Like it's that battle right there is very significant. I mean, we talked about the Bhagavad Gita. Um, all we have is our action, and that work by Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art.
Yeah.
And I just see how it's being intimately acquainted with where we put our attention and recognizing that when that resistance shows up, and how we sit with that. And it's, gosh, it's just so beautiful how it never ceases to amaze me. The smallest amount of leaning in that moment yields the most beautiful
Mm,
shift.
yeah.
And so I want to continue to do like practice that. And the reason I'm talking about it right now is like I'm just honoring that that is a thing in my life and that I recognize uh, it's one of the beauties of being creative and you know, being able to share with the world.
I love that, man. I love that you recommended a book to me a while ago, another Stephen Pressfield. I think it was one of his newer books. It's like put your heart where your ass is or something like that. Put your
Ah,
ass
you
where
put
your
your
heart
ass
is.
where your heart wants
Yeah,
to
yeah.
be.
And it was good. I love his style of writing, right? Generally speaking, like I think The War of Art is perhaps one of his longer ones, because even the audiobook for that one is quite short and it's very just concise. There's like almost quotes, like each chapter is like maybe a paragraph is a chapter kind of thing, right? But they're
Mm.
very just like impactful, economic with his words, to the point that it's like it's got that impact to it. And what I like about that, and I think a theme that we could sort of branch off of what you're talking about, is just that artist showing up, the number one, the gateway habit to any other habit. The number one habit essentially is the habit of showing up. Is the consistent. That's the Mark England, both of one of our mentor to both of us, is like rule number one is start. Rule number two is keep going. Right? It's just
Keep
like
going.
that consistency piece is, and it is. I like viewing it as more of an art. You know what I mean? Because what I mean by that is there is some like um emotion to it, because like when you hear like consistency, sometimes I think there's like it seems a bit like robotic or sort of like,
Robotic,
right,
exactly.
it's just like
Yeah.
you're just showing up. I think there's more
Machine.
machine like, right, and I think there's a lot
Yeah.
more to that, because I'm showing up and I having another great quote that you had, dude. It was off, we didn't record it, so it's cool that we get a chance to bring it up. I get a chance to reflect it back to you. You mentioned, I think it was something along the lines of being a business owner or an entrepreneur is like the ultimate self-development program,
Yeah.
something along those lines. I was like, oh, you nailed it, right? Because, and that's what it is. So for me, showing up consistently every day also means that parts of me that are young or undeveloped, or there's been some arrested development in or from, show up as well, and depending on where my energy level is, when that part comes online, it'll have more strength than it would on a normal day, right? So there are some days that I show up and there is X amount to do, and I have a little bit of my um nobody showed up for my birthday party inner 10-year-old is showing up as well, and he's very much online because I don't quite have the energy, you know what I mean? So to me, that is the art of showing up, is managing that and like having that show up in my creative process as well, and welcoming that, and every part is welcomed, and there's a collaboration with these different sides of me through the time continuum that still exist within me. So yeah, I don't really have a question, but it's just a kind of a topic. How does that sort of show up for you?
Well, yeah, there's so much to unpack in terms of the simplicity of get started, keep going,
Mm,
and then the nuance of the razor thin line of walking our edge. And I love the metaphor because it's part of the practice that I teach in a yoga practice where we get into an uncomfortable, we get to an experience of a sensation within a pose. And by the way, in yoga, it's like the pose is a metaphor for life. Like everything is a pose, everything is a moment to be. And it's when we get ourselves to that, able to walk ourselves to the edge. And I like to think about the edge as this, it's not what people think and what I expect people to think upon initial interacting with the idea of an edge being intense or um, exaggerating the um, danger of being at the I like the edge is being a few steps back from that
mm,
and actually fully present there. And really what I mean by that in terms of the nuance is in the Taoist symbol, that swivel between the balance of the yin and the yang, which is
Mm.
continuously manifesting itself, is that edge, and it is that being at the precipice of life. And when you reflected back to me how business and entrepreneurship, I mean, it is that kind of self-development because it brings the mirror up.
Hmm.
It's like an intimate relationship. It brings the mirror right to our face, and it's like, this is what triggers you.
Hmm.
This is what you have no time and space for.
Yeah.
And it's like it'll keep showing us that until we try something different, or we learn to be a different way in that moment,
Mhm.
or choose a different experience around it. I mean, there's so much to explore within that. And because I like to grow, because I feel my life has been uh, greatly influenced by understanding and knowing what it means to grow, to shed skins, to literally, metaphorically and metaphorically. I'm totally up for leaning into that. And there's still it's the wrangling with the inner voices of, oh, I didn't give that much effort today,
Mm.
or,
Yeah.
or, um, I could have shown up differently. And uh, in it's to me, it's coming back to that. How present can I stay with that wiggling desire, with that antsy part of me that wants to squirm out of just some kind of, because we're talking about also personality structures too.
Hmm.
And I know in my personality structure, and I'm not sure where it couches, where to put it inside the conversation of identity and what we can create with versus like what's an intrinsic personality, and how much do we uh, have influence over that? Or do we want to influence that? And so my a big part of my personality is, I know I'm wandering here, but it's there. It's the freedom. It's the desire to expand, and the desire to see and perceive many different
Mm.
dimensions of things. And so there's that part of me, and that feels very to the source of me. I see that manifest in so many different ways. And then there's the coming to, it's like a immovable object and an unstoppable force coming together,
Yeah.
where for whatever reason the desire in me is to have a business where that part of me has to interface with structure and organizing and uh, other business, other aspects of the business, which would be helpful for me to grow business. And there it is again, the edge. So it's like, it's that the more I know myself and the more I know my tendencies, the more present I can be,
Mm.
and also kind I can be with myself when there's an endeavor. And then all the practices, that's all the practices being put to use in that moment.
Mm.
And we get, the good news is we get to see that moment, we get to reflect, and we get to uh own the story and how we're going to use that next time to learn from it, to get better at whatever it is. I just love that process as much as I say there is me absolutely having a moment where I can really be with my the part of me that wiggles and squirms and wants to get out of the tedious side
Mm.
of things.
Mm.
So yeah, it's fun. It's a dance for
It,
sure.
it is. It is. I love, yeah, everything you said really, really resonates. I jotted down a couple things. One thing that I wanted to go back to, and that you actually introduced me to, is yin yoga. I had done different forms. Perhaps I'd done it once. I think I'd done yin yoga in a hot room once years ago, and it was when I was running quite a bit, and I was super tight, and I was incredibly uncomfortable, and I felt like there's the pacing and everything. I didn't quite get it right, and then after I started, practicing with you through Enlifted, and then of course through your community and such, I really started to clue in to what it's all about. And what I mean by that is, I like anything, like I find like music, different creative ventures are sort of like active analogies for life, right? Or like how that I show up for life, and it's beautiful to be able to express myself through music, because I've put the work in, so I can kind of articulate sort of at the speed of thought almost, right? And I feel like there's so
Mm.
many elements of me that come out in the way I play guitar and sing and such. And then with yin yoga, the analogy for life, that being when you're talking about the squirmy, even when you say that, I kind of start, you know what I mean? Squirm, like even the word squirmy kind of, oh yeah, I got that. I'm very active, inside of me. And so to be able to do yin yoga and realize that, like, holding a posture that's uncomfortable, I say uncomfortable for like 3 minutes, I love it, because for me, it's same thing with breath work, or even swimming, or even running, right? And I want to talk to you more running, we're going to go with this. uh it's like it's uncomfortable initially, and my body's like, no, I don't want to do this. And then after that, it's like, it's really not, it's actually,
Yeah.
yeah, when you accept it, and you can like cerebrally line it up with, and your body accepts it, and you got that alignment, it's great. And then it's like one of those things where like a lot of other elements get turned down as a result. Like I can feel certain anxieties and different things actively getting turned down while I'm in that pose, right? And the rest of the day, I'm like, well, sort of like that moon, not quite the moon landing moment, but like, it's like, hey, if I could do this earlier, certainly I can get through this, right? So I love that about the yin yoga. And yeah, I guess just any thoughts on that before I obviously have a couple of things I want to ask you about. But yeah, are you jiving on what I'm saying with yin yoga?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've been teaching it for several years and trainings, and the I get giddy when I'm talking obviously I'm talking about around a practice that is very what's the word? Close to my heart, and also very at the heart of transformation.
Mm.
And still it's the best we can do is talk about it. And then when I get to teach it in a training capacity, and the students go like, I fucking get what you're talking about, like I get that moment of
Yeah.
it's incredible of what we experience when we stay present with an experience. And and it's like I consider it certainly a part of my work to be able to talk slash guide people to have that, and also to impact, like not to just be orchestrating that for them, but to say, all right, here, like you can do that for yourself. And also that's back to the same conversation about us being savvy and being agents is a great word, agents of our attention, where our attention goes.
Yes.
So yeah, that practice is and continues to be spellbinding, spell breaking, uh, because it's like plant medicine. Honestly, like I've had. I'm sure it's an interesting topic for you because there's a lot of potentially reservation of partaking in plant medicine when somebody has been or has a challenging relationship with substance.
Totally.
And I get that.
Mhm.
And to me, you do enough yin yoga or meditation, and you can break into rather that knowing of, if I can stay present and move my attention deeper into the experience, then it's like it's plant medicine, man. It's just unlocking that infiniteness of the present moment,
Yeah.
which, it's, yeah, plant medicine has that ability to really show it off in a big, intense way. But in yin yoga, I mean, it comes across to me too. So
Definitely.
anyway, I digress.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I love that, man. The a couple things that came to mind too when you're um when you were talking, just the whole topic here with yin yoga. If I were to make an analogy for like something that happens in life that's similar to that, it's like, when you go out to like a party and you're not necessarily gonna know everybody, and it's always like that first 10 or 15 minutes, that's kind of like the icebreaker, and everybody's sort of okay. And then after that, you sort of settle in. That's kind of how I view
Mm,
like yin yoga is, like that first like settling in posture where it's like, okay, yeah, like how am I going to do this? So like, it's almost like the anticipation, and when you get into it, like, oh, this is uncomfortable, right? Blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as you kind of just find your groove, you're good. And similar to even getting, like, for me, for getting sober, or like just alcohol free, was like, it's like awkward at first, right? And I guess it's
yes,
like change, just change in general in life. There,
I'm
you're
fascinated.
Yeah, I get it. I get in my head. I'm like, I'm worried. I'm like, oh, is this how it's going to be the rest of, you know what I mean? There's like a lot of
Yeah.
questions. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it just kind of like, you hit your groove and you're like, oh, okay, never mind. This is actually so to me, it's like, those are like the analogies that yin yoga, or the lessons, I guess, that yin yoga can and do teach you about yourself, in like these 3-minute intervals that then apply to so many other different aspects of your life.
Yeah, and the wisdom it's like the wisdom that is able to, what's the word I would love to say? The wisdom that transcends
Yeah.
that awkward moment at the beginning of the party, or whatever endeavor it is, where it's like the it's the wrangling and tangling with the unknown of it, and of
Mm,
course this is the time where all the stories and all the shit comes up,
of course.
because we've not it is in the unknown. And I just think it's fascinating, that part of the journey. And then what is interesting after that is, like, we can find how we be, to use that, like, in within whatever the context is of that skill or that social engagement or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because then old patterns can come back. This is also an interesting thing,
Ooh,
right? Old
good.
patterns, thought process, we get too used to it. We that there's a there because what WhatsApp is do or what
Yeah,
is
sure.
this?
Registering your air quotes as like summoning balloons, perhaps. I don't know what's going on.
I
Anybody's
don't
listening to
know,
the
but
audio.
it's hilarious.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I called it
um,
WhatsApp, so it's just upset that I called it WhatsApp. What are we on, Zoom? That's right.
oh,
Um,
that was good. Man, you got some special powers you
so
keep telling me about here.
yeah, ugh, I hope I got more important powers than that. No, I'm kidding. Um,
Yeah. Um,
it's that moment of, yet like, begin again. The masters say, and like, one of the meditation techniques that I love and how it applies to the yin yoga is, it's like, it's begin again. It you
mm,
you lo- you begin again. If you get distracted, begin again. And it's
Yes.
like we get settled into something, and then we can start to see old aspects of ourselves show up. And it's like, it's time to reinvent yet again.
Mhm.
Or just take stock and say, like, okay, what's serving me, what's not serving me, what can I do differently? And I say this it just as really putting this process under a microscope, which I love, the awkward, the tangle with the unknown, where most of us bail out our nervous system or whatever, how we are informed from a young age. Wow, man,
There it
I'm
goes
I'm
again.
really
Yeah.
I've got, if you're watching this, you see what's happening. If you're listening, I'm making fireworks in Zoom. So
Fireworks. Yeah.
um yeah, so it's that initial breaking through the crust, so to speak, of ourselves, of our psyche. And that's where most of us bail out. Like this is the where trauma or where other things like they trigger us, and we are like we default to the old pattern. And then we can get we the beautiful thing is, if we're able to walk ourselves through the crust,
Yeah.
or soften or play with it or get more malleable with it. I know I'm speaking in metaphor. I hope you can relate.
Yeah.
Then we have the opportunity to break into something special, something creative,
Mm.
and then we get comfortable with whatever that is, and we start to see other, the familiar aspects of how we may have sabotaged or may have gotten lazy in other aspects of that showing up again. And then how do we again? It's like, oh, you lost touch with the present moment of what you're doing. And the fascinating thing about that awkward phase is it's either get present with it, or it'll spit you out. Like,
Right.
so it's
Right.
just, goodness me, got excited there.
No,
Fireworks.
that's yeah, the fireworks, man. I was like, I like would have been perfect. It's like right at your final point or whatever, and then it's like boom. Yeah. Yeah. It was cool.
It's definitely giving a test to my already easily distractible brain.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Shiny
thanks,
objects
Zoom.
are surrounding you
Yeah.
at this point during your monologue.
Mhm.
I that was funny, man. There's a couple of things that came to mind, like when you're talking about reinvention, and I was thinking about this as a topic because I deal with obviously with a lot of people that view it as a complete failure, like when they have a slip up or a relapse or flame out or whatever terminology you want to use for it. Go back to the drug of choice that they had after X amount of time away from it, basically, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh man, I'm starting over. And I say, well, it's not
Mhm.
really, right? It's like there's so many different
Mhm.
analogies you can use here. Like a sports team after 10 victories in a row and they lose one, it's not gonna be like, oh man, we lost one. We suck. Like what you just had 10 victories in a row. Like there's so many different ways to look at this. And I like it when you're saying is like the reinvention part. I'm finding more and more, there was part of me, I think a few years ago, perhaps, that one like I thought like reinvention was going to be like ego death. Like I was literally going to be a completely different person, not realizing that reinvention, I think it can be a lot more subtle than that. Like you can make a pretty big lasting impact on a personality trait or just something to do with your way about going about something. That's literally, it's just like, the satellite dish analogy where you remember the big 80s satellite dishes outside and we're getting zero channels. It's all scrambled. You go outside and you move it a quarter of an inch and all of a sudden the 200 channels come back. Like something
Mhm.
a little bit more like that. Like I'm thinking of reinvention is not as dramatic or all encompassing as perhaps what I thought it was before. And if
And
you're
that,
kind of comparing the two, like it's like
oh,
relapse isn't going all the way back to the start. You slipped up, like it's like you're hiking up a mountain, you slip down 10 feet. That doesn't mean you got to go all the way back to the other. You're still where you were. You're back a few steps, but and plus you're going to be a lot safer the next time you peak that part of the mountain too, right? So I'm just, I guess, kind of trying to tie in the idea of
mm,
reinvention, and it's a little more subtle, and it's based
mm,
on everything else that you've done up to that point, as opposed to this, okay, fucking start over, reset. You know what I mean? It's not quite the
Yes.
dramatic. It doesn't have to be, and I just don't think by nature it really is.
Dude, I fucking love that you said this, because this is the paradox. The paradox is that it is nuance. However, we expect it to be fireworks,
Right.
big. And because we're looking for that, we
Mm,
miss pulling the weeds out of the ground. And that's all that's required, is to tend our garden. But
yes.
we're out looking for something different.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
radically
Yeah.
like it's uh yeah, I'm not sure what it is about our psyche, and I include myself in this, that the tendency is for to expect something dramatic. It could be a hallmark of our culture, I use the word programming to relate to how we think and perceive as culture within culture, because there's so much of that that's like might as well be oxygen to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to see it. And that's the thing with change, is when we're it's mastery shit is new, is like small
Mm-hmm.
minor course correction.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, how that influences the what we pick up in the adjustment of the satellite receiver. And it's letting go. I would say there's the letting go of the excitement, maybe which would be an attachment thing,
Mm.
to like a whole new, oh well, if I just achieve that, or if I just
Yeah.
make that transformation, I'm a whole new person, I can leave all this behind. Like that could
Yes.
be,
Yeah.
there's an ego attachment, excitement to that too.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah, it's I love that point though, of the nuance of transformation, and how we can totally like miss it by expecting it to be or look a certain different way.
Definitely. I like how you tied in the
Yeah.
fireworks thing there too. You were expecting fireworks, and I was expecting
Yeah.
fireworks to then come out of your head, but they didn't. So there you go. Yeah. Now you can't recreate it apparently. Maybe it was
Yeah, no, it's gotta,
you had the secret terminology.
yeah.
Um, you know what it's like, and I like I want to say this is out of, I want to give it proper credit. I think it's out of Atomic Habits. James Clear mentions this. It's like the difference between if a plane leaves across, say, like in
Yeah.
California, and it's like 1/4% off, it'll end up in like, it's the difference between ending up in like Toronto or I don't know exactly what bad at this, I guess New York, Toronto or New York, we'll just
Yeah,
say
very far.
very far
Thousands of miles
difference, but just from
difference.
that like seemingly like tiny little difference when you did make that change, but then over that long enough timeline, I guess is my point, is like, so just to sort of tie back into this, piggyback on what we were talking about earlier, there isn't a need to like you're talking, I love the gardening analogy. It's like, just tend to those weeds, because that's right in front of you, that's in your control, and that's what's going to then grow something much more plentiful, I guess, the next spring or whatever. Like have
Right.
that in mind, what's in front of you right now, and believe that 1% or whatever you're doing, that small little change accumulates massively over a long enough timeline, right?
Yeah, 100%. And to that person that has a story about falling off their trajectory or whatever, I love it's a classic proverb, you never put your hand in the same river twice.
Yeah.
And that's because the river is always flowing and changing, but also you are too,
Yeah.
in that. So, like, I remember when I used to really struggle with binge eating and with my relationship with food, which I can associate that. I mean, if somebody talks to me about their relationship with alcohol, and it's dysfunctional, then I'm like, I think about my relationship with food, and how that was a crutch for me for years, and binge eating would have been, by way of having a bender.
Right.
Very similar, even
Mhm.
the hangover.
Right. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
and how the less charged I would be about making a quote, air quote, mistake.
Mm.
There they go. That this gives
Floats their
me
balloons.
umbrella.
You got it. Yeah.
All right. So the less uh charged meaning uh self loathing would be
Mm.
self-loathing.
Mhm.
So pulling out that venom, and I really believe, and I'm also like, because it has the potential to be so incredibly helpful for people to understand what that A to B is journey of going from really intense inner critic and spiraling downward to, that just that happens,
Mhm.
whatever, like, which is years of, and I want to make it, I don't want to make it sound daunting, but like the energy practices, awareness practices, self-development, there is an energy to that reactivity to the stimulus.
Mm.
And the more I've diminished that energy, the less reactivity there is. And it's about each individual getting learning, and you will absolutely, if you're listening to this, you will absolutely be attracted to, and what you require will show up for you. Like,
Mm.
you don't have to figure that shit out. The beautiful thing is, universe has got your back.
Yeah.
So just honor what's showing up for you,
Yeah.
and that journey, and an iteration of getting that, getting from that, in the intensity of, oh, I fucked up, and all that inner critic of whatever it is, whatever you did, to, oh, right, it's just so much less substantial. And then the way we carry on, which is everything, the way we course correct,
Yeah.
the way we bring our attention back to what we are aligned with, that's the mastery part of it. But
Yes.
first thing we got to do is deal with that overwhelming um, misdirection that gets played up by when we get triggered,
Mm.
and through our own actions, our own behaviors, our own shame, our own guilt, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Absolutely. I like what you're saying, and the more I learn about this too, and it's funny. I kind of had this idea when I was younger too, but it's like the older you get and the more you're exposed to certain ways, the proper ways of doing things or conditioning from the career and just the story that you of the shoulds and the supposed to's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Further I got down that journey, I kind of got away from the idea of like just pursuing something and removing the idea of like, how is that going to happen? How is that possible? When I
Mm.
was younger, I'm like, well, it's going to, like, I wanted that bad, right? And then somewhere along the line, that took a big dip and took a backseat, big time backseat, to just the mechanics of just doing the thing, right?
Mm.
And then turning that whole side of me down, like the dream side, essentially. And now that I'm coming
Yeah.
up out the other side, I'm getting back into that. And now I'm like, what I mean by that is like, anytime I'm butting up against something now, I do my best to just understand what it is, give myself the grace, and realize, okay, this is an old pattern showing up. What do I need at this time? Do I need to step away? Whatever. And when I do, after that, my mindset is always, I'm going to look back at this day right now, even 2 weeks, 2 months from now, and I'll realize what that was for. I'll have that different perspective, just the time and space in between when it happened and everything else that's happened, and realize it was really the best thing I could have done was just like, hey, it's all good, and not worry about what I'm getting at is like not worrying about the how, that
Mm-hmm.
universal law, or
Yes.
you know what I mean, our understanding that like the universe has your back. So you just don't have to get wrapped up in, like, I like what you're saying, kind of that intertwined tanglement that you can get with different things and experiences. And, to end it with like a quote that I heard the other day that I really liked. It was like, life is 10% what happens to you, and this is 90% how you respond
How
to
you
it.
respond to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's like, and there, and you can get excited about that, because just perhaps that sounds overwhelming, or like, ooh, like, what am I supposed to do with that? That seems, whatever you want to say about it. But to me,
It's the
that's,
response of responsibility, brother. Like,
yeah, yes,
uh, Hefe living. Hefe is like, this is my brand, boss. Hefe translates to boss or to leader, and it's literally, to me, representative of the glory it is to wake up to our responsibility.
yeah,
Now, a lot have that idea that responsibility is a burden,
yes, yeah,
and if slash when we can change that idea, that responsibility means you can do it, like you can open your own doors, like
hmm,
nobody's going to do it for you.
hmm,
And that's the greatest thing, because why would you want somebody to do it for you?
totally, totally. The other
Anyway,
part,
sorry,
oh,
I love that, what you were saying about how we choose to respond, and how that is everything to do with
it,
how comfortable we are with responsibility.
it totally is. And, like, even the word responsibility, I think, can get, there's like sort of a potentially a negative connotation, because there's like, it gets kind of, it can be kind of accusatory. That was your responsibility, right? It kind of gets,
Uh-huh, yeah, yeah,
it gets
yeah.
thrown around as kind of like this thing that can be a little bit more fluid, unless you really understand that it's like, to your point, it's one of the most empowering, if not the most empowering thing that you can do with your life. And I'll give the ultimate example. To me, like, the opposite of having like a victim mentality, or things happening to you, or like, this happened to me and that's why I can't do X and Y, or, you know what I mean? And obviously here, and I've done it before in my life too. I'm certainly not perfect with it. But this is, to me, the opposite of being victimized or having a victim mentality is having responsibility, right? Because you can still, the fact that you've been victimized, you're not saying that, like, you're not bypassing that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You're acknowledging it. You're just not giving it more power than it needs to have. You're just like,
Yeah,
what I'm
massive.
going to do with what is left on the other side, is that's up to me. That was an acute circumstance that happened, and it doesn't need to echo through the rest of my life. In fact, it will not, because I now choose to respond this way to that. And then all of a sudden you have this like comeback story, which is ultimately, to me, it's like one of my favorite stories of like mankind, of humankind, is like somebody bouncing back from something, and turning it, like, this adversity into like their greatest triumph, right? Like, who does, that's giving me goosebumps every time.
Always.
So
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
that's
Feel
responsibility,
that.
right? Yeah,
Hero's journey. The ability to manage how that experience, how we relate to that experience, because there's something. Now think about this: how satisfying is it when we choose to keep our power, instead of giving that power to that story, or to that narrative, or to that thing that happened? Like, because that thing could take all of our power, and oftentimes
yep,
it does.
right,
And it's just like, why? Like, take the power back.
yes,
Why are you get like, anyway? All of this metaphor, all of this stuff. I love getting into that, into the philosophical conversation. And I also love putting, like, letting the rubber meet the road, as you know. And like,
yeah,
we're talking about it, sharing our life experiences.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're saying. One of the key words, I wrote it down right when we first started talking, was like the embodiment part, right?
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this too, is like, when there's something to cerebrally understand it, or like to read or to learn, and at a certain threshold, a certain period, learning or reading another book, it's becomes like a sort of a more elaborate form of procrastination, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
you're not embodying it or integrating what you're learning. It's, it's, you're only getting to a certain stage. There's a lot of people, I think, in the self-development field that it's like, okay, I've learned, I have this awareness about myself now. And they're like, okay, perfect. Now I know why I do that. And then the next step to me is like, okay, now with that awareness, it's really hard. You can't just go back to the way you were before, right? I should speak for myself. I can't go back to the way I was before as soon as I know a certain thing about myself. And then it's like, okay, well, how can I, change the grooves in the records, so to speak? Like, so those are pretty deep.
Yeah.
How can I just kind of, edge the needle over so it's going to start, playing a different song when I have that scenario that would otherwise, trigger me into doing this exact same shit that I've done for the past like 20 years, right?
Yoga has this, the samskaras, uh, is that the word or is it another word? Anyway, vasanas are deeply rooted patterns. So vasanas. And it's like this, how you when you suppress or repress things, it's like trying to hold, eventually it becomes like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Like you can hold it underwater, but it's going to exhaust you at some point, and it's going to show up and it's going to rear its ugly head, in this case a colorful beach ball. And I bring that up because there's so much to looking at the philosophy, relating it to our life, and then asking how can I live in terms of the embodiment in a way that is going to ultimately serve or create something that feels more aligned for myself or for you in your life. And the embodiment piece relative to the continued like ego, building up the part, maybe it's building up the part of yourself that just likes to know things and likes to be right and likes to create that, because ego loves to create separation.
Right.
So we can that can be a part of our identity as the person that knows everything. And I mean, I say that because I know that part of myself. So that's just another it's another way of that thing showing up. So it's awareness that you're saying. The practices that we talk about are facilitating awareness. So it's like, okay, I see that this record is stuck on this groove. To use your analogy, how can I, or what will it take? What different behaviors or way of thinking, or even can I be curious about what is a different experience in this effing song that keeps playing? So like, don't even be mad at the song. It's just like, this song is playing. This song is playing, right?
Exactly.
And then this is one of my favorite quotes, Robert Johnson, in this book called, which is great around the idea that it's so hilarious to say, the idea of integration or the idea of embodiment, but because it's not an idea, it's a doing, it's a different way of being.
Right.
And so anyway, a great quote is, healing doesn't happen in the light. We had this idea that healing happens in the light, right? Healing, so the quote goes, healing doesn't happen in the light, healing happens when the light and the dark meet. So it's right. So it's the awareness meets the shadow.
Yeah. Wow.
That's where the air gets let out of the volleyball. That's where, or the beach ball. That's where the energy gets out of whatever that is. There's always an energy to these patterns or parts of us that we are suppressing. There's an energy to that needs to be released in order for it to be dealt with or see or just shifted or transformed. And so that energy part of that is the embodiment of the practices, because embodying something is building different grooves. It's if it's a particular practice like yin yoga, then it's going to be drawing out the energy, or it's going to be shifting the energy within ourselves. So all of that to say, like, how does that then um, express or show up in day-to-day life? And I'm these days, I love to teach yoga, and I love to hold space, and I love to facilitate healing for people. And also what I'm super interested in is what's my next embodiment of, for me, it's like being more connected with the earth, being more connected with community, and what feels right for example, the for my own individual self, but also the future, like of how do I want to see or participate towards human living
Mm,
on our earth and in our communities and things like that, as another idea of embodiment.
that's cool, man. That's like next level, that's I love that a lot. Like you're talking like some of the getting into like some mastery. To me, that's like the next level mastery. It's like you're getting to the point that yes, you're literally like, yeah, like so you said it's not like it's something that I forget how you worded it. The embodiment. It's like the something you do versus like an idea. It's like you do it. It's an action. So then you're doing it, it's like with yourself, with others, and then thinking even beyond that to the next level, that being like, you know, the potential global impact or global contribution, if nothing else, you could say that, right? Which is, yeah, it's beautiful, man. I love that phrase about healing happening where the darkness and light meets. It's a beautiful phrase.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah. What's the book?
I believe it's called Owning Your Shadow
Oh, okay.
by Robert Johnson.
Nice. I'll check it
And
out.
the whole premise of that, and uh it's to be it's comes back to the core of one of the core points of our conversation. When we avoid something, there's usually a big fat treasure chest just
Mm,
on the other side of that.
yeah.
And that's what we're talking about, is when we celebrate that breakthrough, or when we celebrate, if I can get myself to be present with whatever it is, task, that then the creativity flows once I've allowed myself to go through that little dance of squirming or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
exactly, man. Yeah, the crust or whatever you were saying too, like yeah,
Yeah.
getting more
Um,
malleable or flexible with the crust that you're butting up against, right? Or yeah, for sure. Many
yeah.
different, metaphors or analogies, definitely. Yeah.
So the owning your shadow is that we think shadow is all bad stuff, but it's a lot of times people, and I've seen it for myself. Like I've been lucky that I feel like um, self-expression is definitely one of my gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was reflected at a time to me when I was able to be like, take that compliment that said, somebody said, when you speak, people listen, people really tune in. And I wasn't in a place where I just, well, I took at least part of it. And then over the years, I've said, look, okay, there's this part of me that really shines. Like, why don't I let that shine? Whereas there's so many different examples of people just um, hiding from their gifts.
Yeah,
And that's, they hide, where do they hide them? Well, they hide them in the shadow.
sure.
So it's like there's so much potential within going into our shadow, going into the unsavory parts of ourselves,
Mm,
because usually that's where our greatest creative potential lies.
that's beautiful, man. I love that. I think there's two other topics I want to just talk about before we get going. That one of them being talking about your community and how to find you online, and the other one about what you're partaking in tomorrow. So
Oh, nice one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to and just what you said there, I think is like what a perfect way to end the conversation today, and then have it very open for our next conversation. So
Yeah, dude, I love it. We'll keep going.
definitely, definitely. I have a few ideas I'll run by you offline here for sure. But yeah, so you're doing a marathon. You sort of casually mentioned is that as you do when we
As one does.
started. So tell me a bit about that. Like a marathon to I think a lot of people, I know a few runners, of course, that'd be like, oh, good for you, want to talk about it. But the majority of people, like for you to sort of take that on, I guess what's it specifically, I'm curious about what your mindset is going in, because I know that's
Oh,
for me, that's a big part of it is the mental side of doing a marathon can be just as hard, if not arguably harder than the physical side of it.
yeah. Well, the mindset for me is it's done. Like it's
Hmm.
uh like I, because I have done marathons in the past, because I also am currently connected with the base of the base of fitness that I am, and I have I have a grip, I so to speak, of my fitness and what it is required to run a marathon. And I also have a friend, and I know that we're going to walk some of it, so we're not going to always be running. So we're going to do some kind of on off where it's more manageable because one, this marathon isn't for a record or for time. It is to raise awareness. At the beginning of the month, I just had a mustache. I shaved all this, but I grew it back because I missed it. It's
Nice.
winter time. It's time
Yeah.
for the beard. And it's Movember, the month for, the Movember charity around men's mental health, and the staggering numbers about uh like I lost my uncle to suicide, my grandfather to suicide, who I never met, by the way, and also obviously dealt with my own inner battles. And so it's a great opportunity to support my friend Tony, who started doing a marathon every day this month.
What?
And he's done, it's not even his, like, dude, he has done even Tony Riddle, the natural lifestylist on Instagram, if you want to check him out. But
Cool.
um, yeah, some of the physical endeavors he's done is like he has done are just, he ran the whole length of the British island barefoot in 30 days. So he was doing 30 miles a day. So anyway, his initial goal was to do that, and then he sprained his ankle, and so his community, like which was a great thing. I mean, as a byproduct, he reached out and said, "Hey, I need help," which is the whole like premise of this is like you can ask for help and you can certainly receive support. And there's and remember, I'm talking to individual listening to this. Remember how good it is to be able to step up and support somebody in their time of need,
Hmm.
right? And
Mhm.
then remember how it's a gift that if you request support, that it is for somebody else to be able to do that stepping up for you.
Hmm.
So that's reciprocity. That's a big thing that, we can break through as a collective, and understanding that it's okay to request support. It's a privilege for other people to support us. Obviously, part of that is we have to be willing to receive that, and
Hmm.
that's a big piece. So anyway, Tony hurt his ankle and said, I need help. I have this plan to do this many marathons, and what if we do it as a collective? What if you run a 5K? What if you run a 10K? What if you run and we put together a marathon? And so it's grown from that. And I'm here with my friend Rob, and we were with Tony the first day he started. We did a marathon that day, and of course, it's easier with a group,
Hmm. Hmm.
just group energy.
Of course.
And then, and then I'll tell you about mindset going into it. How do I even approach that? I remember for me running my first marathon was super significant,
Yeah.
like huge.
Yeah.
And it really, there's something remarkably poignant
Hmm.
of doing something you haven't done before
Hmm.
in whatever the arena is. Because up until that, you only have ideas
Yeah.
about what that's like.
Mm,
You don't know.
totally.
It's the epitome of fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
And which
Yeah.
which is like you got like that being said, if you do something of an endurance or if you do something physical, like train for it, of course,
Hmm.
that's going to be helpful and also make it more enjoyable when you do it. So anyway, my mindset going into the marathon tomorrow is that it's in the bag. It's going to be a fun day. We'll do it over. We're going to do 4 laps in this beautiful forest in nature. It may be a little bit rainy, but um, we're not breaking our necks uh to reach some kind of time,
Totally.
and I'm cool with that. Um, and then I know my base of fitness will let me do that with relative ease, which I'm happy about.
Beautiful, man. I love that. I like it's like it's done. It's in the bag. Confidence without without arrogance. It's just like, hey, I you know what you put in every day, you know where your physical fitness is. So in that sense, you have been, putting the reps in for, on your just on a daily basis, right? To get yourself up to that. So,
Hmm.
and the group effort and all that. So yeah, really cool, man. Thanks for sharing that and sending you. I'll be thinking about you tomorrow, sending you good vibes
Thank
that way.
you.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. Cool to catching
Much
you.
appreciated.
Yeah, man, cool catching you at any time, but especially if you're about to, do something like that. That is a pretty epic thing coming out of for a really good cause as well as we, wind down 2023, which is insane to think. It's man, it went by quick, didn't it?
Wow, dude. Yeah.
This
What a
crazy.
year.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
What a
absolutely.
year.
Totally agree. If folks are interested, speaking of, if people are interested, I know the beginning of the year is a big period of transition or change, transformation, whatever you want to, however you
I
want to
love it.
for people, right? So if somebody does want to reach out to you, I know you have obviously we've mentioned the Hefe Living Collective, a fantastic. If anybody's familiar with Mighty Networks, even if you're not, it's a community page app that you can get, and just wonderful trainings and the weekly get-togethers online that Jeff has. Highly recommended. I've been a part of Hefe Living for over a year now and thoroughly enjoy it. So can't say enough good stuff about that. Also, Rising Tide Retreats. If you wanted to mention that, anything that you want to, I guess, suggest to people as the new year approaches, if they are interested in working with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the space. And
Totally.
I love that time of year. I totally get into the vibe and the collective energy of I just fucking love optimism
Oh,
and the desire for some, change and to chart it all out. And I just love it. So
yeah, yeah,
power to all of us for that. And then Cafe Living Collective, like you said, there's weekly classes live and a big growing catalog of recorded classes and also trainings and programs all around just what I'm very passionate about in terms of awareness and evolving a consciousness and self-development transformation personally. And um I love that and I love to teach it. I feel like I've definitely got a knack for it, for making that connection with the people who I do connect with. So check that out, and there's a free trial
cool.
to do that. And then Rising Tide Retreats is an offering for somebody who's in this space. And by in this space, I mean a wellness practitioner, a yoga teacher, a coach. And I've put together, because I've had the opportunity to create and be a part of events, transformational events for the last several years. I've seen what can happen with community when people are brought together and a few simple, amazing practices bring people together. And there's so many people um, that have connection with community, and what better could what better way to serve than to have a 2 day event or a day event where you get together and you do the breath work, or you do the ice bath, or you do the whatever. There's so many different modalities and tools, and really Rising Tide Retreats is about meeting the practitioner where they are, facilitator where they are, and saying, hey, let's put together an event. You can do it, and it will bring your community together, and it will be like an epic and worthwhile experience if you feel the call, of course. So it's the logistics and support and empowerment and coaching, because a lot of times people want to do that, but they have the classic, what if nobody shows up? What if, what if I'm not good enough? What have I got to say?
Mm.
Blah, blah, blah bullshit. We know it's like that. But really, I'm there to to work through that stuff and then to make it happen, like support the other person in making it happen. So and this comes back to the embodiment part that I was really excited about. Like, what can I do that is an ode to the future I wish to be a part of? And I know when people are sharing their light and sharing their gifts with their community, and it's with that intention of transforming, connecting with nature, connecting with health, wellness, well-being, whatever. Like, the more people and groups around the world that are doing that, the better the future is going to be. It's like immediately knowing that that's contributing to the future.
Totally.
So anyway, long-winded answer, but that's what that program is about. And I'm sure Matt will drop the details for you to just get in touch with me and ask me questions.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, missed our conversations. It's we obviously keep up the chatter here and there where we can on Instagram with voice memos and otherwise well wishes with the text messages and such. But it's always great to reconnect like this, a little more long form. And yeah, it's always a pleasure, Jeff. So thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I got a couple ideas I'll run by you as soon as we stop rolling the tape here. But thanks again for coming on, my friend.
Thanks, brother.
All right.